A single, mocking laugh cost Stratosphere Airlines nearly $1 billion in less than 45 minutes. Security cameras at Gate 42B didn't capture sound, but the body language was unmistakable. A uniformed gate agent leaning over the counter, sneering at a quiet woman in a tailored emerald suit, mimicking her pronunciation while pointing toward the back of the plane. He saw an easy target, a confusing accent, and a passenger he deemed out of place in the priority lane. He didn't see the woman who had just signed the authorization to acquire the airline's primary fuel logistics partner. Disrespect has a price, but Brandon Kiefer was about to find out that some receipts are too expensive to pay. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the frenetic energy of a Tuesday morning delay. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the tarmac into a gray smear of wet concrete and flashing yellow lights. Inside, the humidity rose with the temper of 300 passengers waiting to board Flight 808 to London Heathrow. At the helm of this chaos stood Brandon Kiefer. Brandon was 34, with a jawline he spent too much time admiring in the staff restroom mirror and a badge that gave him just enough authority to be dangerous. He wasn't just a gate agent. In his mind, he was the gatekeeper. He managed the priority lane like a bouncer at an exclusive club, deriving a sick sort of pleasure from turning people away. Zone 1 only, he would bark, pointing a manicured finger at confused tourists. Read the sign. Step aside. Today, Brandon was in a particularly foul mood. His performance review was coming up in 3 days. He was gunning for the station manager position, a role that came with a significant raise and, more importantly, an office where he wouldn't have to talk to passengers. He needed to show efficiency. He needed the boarding process to be ruthless. Next, he snapped, not looking up from his monitor. A woman stepped forward. She was striking, though not in the way Brandon usually noticed. She was in her late 40s, her skin a deep, luminous mahogany that contrasted beautifully with the sharp tailoring of her emerald green suit. She wore no jewelry aside from a simple gold band on her thumb and a vintage watch that vanished under her cuff. She carried a leather portfolio tucked under one arm and a sleek, nondescript black carry-on. She approached the podium with a calm that seemed out of place amidst the frantic crowd. She placed her boarding pass on the scanner. Beep. The light turned red. Brandon sighed, a long, exaggerated exhalation of air that ruffled his bangs. He looked up, his eyes already narrowed in annoyance. Boarding pass error. You're in the wrong zone, ma'am. Economy boards in 20 minutes. The woman smiled politely, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Her posture remained straight, unyielding. I believe there is a mistake, sir, she said. Her voice was soft, melodic, wrapped in the thick, rhythmic cadence of a West African accent, specifically Nigerian, though Brandon neither knew nor cared to distinguish. I am ticketed for first class. Seat 2A. Brandon didn't check the screen. He heard the accent, saw the dark skin, and made a snap judgment. He had seen it 1,000 times. Someone trying to sneak an upgrade, someone who didn't understand the system, someone who didn't belong. Look, Brandon said, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a patronizing register. The machine turned red. That means stop. That means you aren't supposed to be here. Now, I have a line of actual priority passengers behind you. Please step aside and wait for Zone 5. The woman didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply tapped the counter with a manicured fingernail. I would ask you to check the code again. My name is Dr. Zola Adewale. The ticket was purchased through the Sovereign corporate account. The red light is likely a system glitch, not a zone error. Brandon laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of amusement. A glitch, he repeated, looking past her to the growing line of impatient businessmen in gray suits. He looked back at her, his smirk widening. You know, it's funny. I get a lot of people telling me the system is wrong, but usually it's just that they can't read. He mimicked her accent then, pitching his voice slightly higher, exaggerating the vowels. I believe there is a mistake. Yeah, the mistake is you blocking my lane. Now move, or I'm calling security. A hush fell over the immediate area. The businessman directly behind Dr. Adewale, a tall man checking his Rolex, looked up, uncomfortable. Disrespect was common in airports, but this was visceral. It was personal. Dr. Adewale stared at Brandon. For a second, the temperature at the gate seemed to drop 10 degrees. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She didn't demand to see a manager, not yet. She simply looked at him with an expression of profound, terrifying pity. "Mr. Kiefer," she said, reading the name tag pinned to his chest. "I am asking you, one last time, to validate my ticket manually. If you deny me boarding, you are making a decision you cannot reverse." "Is that a threat?" Brandon scoffed, straightening up and puffing out his chest. The power rush hit him like a drug. He loved this part, the confrontation, the dominance. Because now it's not just a zone issue, now it's a security issue. "You're being aggressive." "I am standing still," Zola said calmly. "You're disrupting the boarding process," Brandon shouted, his voice echoing in the terminal. He wanted a scene. He wanted to show the managers watching the cameras that he took zero nonsense. "Step out of line, now, or you're not flying at all." Zola Adewale looked at him for 3 long seconds. Then, slowly, she picked up her boarding pass. She didn't argue. She stepped to the side, near the glass window, looking out at the rainy tarmac, and pulled her phone from her pocket. "Fine," Brandon muttered, wiping the counter as if she had left a stain. Next, he thought he had won. He thought he had cleared a blockage in his drain. He had no idea he had just severed the artery of his own career. While Brandon Kiefer continued to process the first-class line, basking in the sympathetic nods of a few impatient passengers who just wanted to get to their gin and tonics, Zola stood by the window. She wasn't angry. Anger was an emotion for people who had no power. Zola had moved past anger years ago. What she felt now was a cold, calculating resolve. She unlocked her phone. It wasn't a standard consumer model. It was a satellite-secure device issued to members of the G20 Advisory Board and top-tier logistics magnates. She scrolled past her family contacts, past her assistant, and tapped a name saved simply as Arthur King, CEO, Stratosphere. She didn't call him. Not yet. That would be too easy. Instead, she opened her email. She navigated to a draft folder titled Project Meridian. Inside was a PDF document, 140 pages long, detailing the final acquisition terms for the Sovereign Travel Group to exclusively manage the cargo and fuel logistics for Stratosphere Airlines for the next 10 years. The deal was valued at $950 million over the decade. It was scheduled to be countersigned in London at 4 p.m. today. That was why she was flying. Zola looked up from her phone and watched Brandon. He was flirting with a young blonde woman in first class, laughing loudly, completely different from the snarling guard dog he had been moments before. He was drunk on his tiny thimble of authority. She approached the counter again, but this time, she stood off to the side, waiting for a lull. When the blonde woman walked away, Brandon spotted Zola. His face curdled. "I told you to wait for Zone 5. Actually, you know what? Since you're still hovering, I'm checking your bag. It looks oversized." "It fits the sizer," Zola said. "I decide if it fits," Brandon sneered. "And I don't like your attitude. You're going to have to gate check that. And because you waited, there's no overhead space left for you anyway. You're in row 48. Middle seat. I'm bumping you." "You are bumping a paid first-class passenger to the last row?" Zola asked, her voice dangerously even. "I'm bumping a disruptive passenger," Brandon corrected, typing furiously on his keyboard. "I'm doing you a favor by letting you on at all. Take the ticket, give me the bag, or get out." He printed a new boarding pass. It was flimsy, thermal paper. Row 48E. By the toilets. Zola took the ticket. She looked at it. Then she looked at Brandon. "You have made your position very clear, Mr. Kiefer," she said. "I will take my seat." "Good," Brandon smirked. "And fix your tone next time. You're in America now." The racism was so casual, so effortless, that it almost didn't register as an insult. It registered as a diagnosis of his character. Zola didn't respond to the slur. She simply handed her bag to the baggage handler, who looked apologetic, and walked down the jet bridge. As she walked, she typed a text message to her chief legal officer, a shark of a man named Benedict Sterling, no relation to the gate agent, thankfully. Message: Initiate Protocol 0 on the Stratosphere deal, immediately. Do not sign the Meridian contract. I want a full withdrawal of the Sovereign Liquidity Fund from their accounts by close of business London time. Reply, 30 seconds later. Zola? That's the nuclear option. We've been negotiating this for 6 months. The termination fee alone. Zola typed, There is no termination fee if the partner violates the non-discrimination and brand integrity clause of the preliminary agreement. I have been racially abused and denied service by their lead agent at JFK. I am currently being forced into economy despite holding a controlling interest stake. Burn it down, Ben. I want them to bleed before I land. She hit send just as she stepped onto the plane. The flight attendant at the door, a kind-looking woman named Sherry, glanced at Zola's ticket. Row 48. Oh, honey, that's all the way back. It's a long flight for the middle seat. It will be a much longer flight for the airline, Zola murmured. Excuse me? Sherry asked. Nothing, Zola smiled warmly. Thank you. She walked past the first-class cabin. She saw seat 2, her seat. It was empty. Brandon hadn't given it to anyone else. He had left it empty just to spite her. She walked through business, through premium economy, and into the cramped, stuffy air of the main cabin. She found row 48. It was indeed right next to the lavatories. The smell of blue chemical disinfectant was already pungent. She squeezed into the middle seat between a teenager with oversized headphones and a sleeping man who smelled of stale tobacco. She placed her portfolio on her lap. She didn't complain. She buckled her seatbelt. She closed her eyes and waited. The plane hadn't even pushed back yet, and the financial machinery of the Sovereign Travel Group was already beginning to turn. Up in the cockpit, Captain Michael O'Connell was running through the pre-flight checklist. He was a veteran pilot, 20 years with Stratosphere. He loved the job, but he hated the corporate politics. Stratosphere was in a fragile place financially. The merger with Sovereign was the only thing keeping their stock price afloat. Everyone knew it. Fuel levels look good, First Officer Evans said. Loading is complete, just waiting on the final manifest from the gate. Copy that, O'Connell said. He keyed the mic. Gate, this is flight deck. We are ready for pushback. Close the doors. Copy, Captain. Brandon's voice came over the radio, sounding smug even through the static. Doors closing. You've got a full house in the back, but we kept a few spots open up front. VIP, no shows. Roger. As O'Connell reached for the throttle to begin the taxi sequence, the ACARS system, the digital messaging system, used for communication between the plane and the airline's operations center, lit up with a priority chime. Ping ping. O'Connell frowned. Usually, messages at this stage were about weather or slot delays. He looked at the screen. Priority message. HQ Ops. Director Harrison Cole to Flight 808. Capt. O'Connell, stop pushback immediately. Do not leave the gate. Repeat. Do not leave the gate. O'Connell froze. Brake set, he barked. What is it? Evans asked, alarmed. HQ just grounded us at the gate, O'Connell said, reading the scrolling text. Message continues. Locate passenger. Dr. Zola Adewale. Manifest list seat 2A. Confirm on board. O'Connell grabbed the manifest. He scanned the first-class list. Adewale, Zola, seat 2A. Yeah, she's listed. He picked up the interphone to the lead flight attendant. Sherry, this is the cockpit. I need you to check seat 2A. Is there a Dr. Adewale there? A pause. Then Sherry's voice came back, confused. Captain, 2A is empty. I have the manifest here, but no one is in the seat. O'Connell typed back to HQ. Passenger, not in seat. Seat empty. The response was instantaneous. HQ. System shows her scanned in. Find her. She is on that plane. Check every seat. The Sovereign Group just pulled the merger funding. They claim the CEO is being held hostage on our aircraft. Find her now. Holy. O'Connell breathed. Evans, you have the controls. I'm going back there. Hostage? Evans's eyes went wide. Is it a hijacking? Worse, O'Connell said, unbuckling his harness. It's a PR apocalypse. Meanwhile, back at the gate, Brandon Kiefer was printing out his end-of-shift report. He was feeling great. He had handled the rush, put a difficult passenger in her place, and cleared the flight on time. He was already thinking about the steak dinner he was going to buy himself to celebrate his upcoming promotion. His phone rang. It was the landline at the podium. The one that rarely rang unless it was serious. He picked it up. Gate 42B, Kiefer speaking. Kiefer! It was the station manager, screeching so loud Brandon had to pull the receiver away from his ear. Did you process a Zola Adewale on flight 808? Yeah, Brandon stammered, his stomach suddenly doing a backflip. I mean, sort of. She was giving me attitude about her zone, tried to fake a first-class ticket. I bumped her to the back. Standard procedure for unruly passengers. There was a silence on the other end. A silence so heavy, it felt like the air pressure in the terminal had dropped. You bumped her? The station manager whispered. Yeah. Row 48. Why? Did she file a complaint? Brandon rolled his eyes. Typical. Kiefer, the manager said, his voice trembling. Do you know who Zola Adewale is? Some Nigerian tourist with a fake ticket? She owns the Sovereign Group, you idiot. She's the one buying the fuel for the planes. She just canceled the $950 million contract because she said the gate agent. You racially profiled her. Arthur King is on the line from headquarters. He wants your head on a spike, Brandon. He wants you to go onto that plane. Find her and get her off that plane before she sues us into bankruptcy. Brandon dropped the phone. It clattered against the desk, dangling by its cord. He looked out the window. The plane was still there. The jet bridge was still connected. His hands started to shake. The steak dinner vanished. The promotion vanished. In their place, a cold, hard knot of fear tightened in his chest. He had sent a billionaire to the toilet row, and now he had to go get her. Captain O'Connell moved through the cabin with the urgency of a man trying to defuse a bomb with seconds on the clock. Behind him, Sherry, the lead flight attendant, followed, her face a mask of confusion and worry. They passed the spacious, quiet luxury of first class, where seat 2A remained glaringly, accusingly empty, and moved through the rustling newspapers of business class. As they reached economy, the atmosphere changed. The air was warmer, the noise level higher. Babies cried. People wrestled with overhead bins. O'Connell, in his crisp uniform with 4 gold stripes on the epaulets, drew stares. It wasn't often the captain walked all the way to the back of the bus before takeoff. Row 40, O'Connell muttered, counting down. 41. 42. He reached row 48. It was the worst seat on the plane. The fuselage tapered here, making the cabin feel claustrophobic. The lavatory door hissed open and shut just feet away, releasing wafts of chemical cleanser and humanity. And there she was. Dr. Zola Adewale sat in the middle seat, her emerald suit looking impossibly vibrant against the drab gray upholstery. Her posture was still regal, her hands folded calmly over the portfolio on her lap. She was staring straight ahead at the seat-back pocket, seemingly meditating amidst the chaos. To her left, the teenager was blasting techno music so loud O'Connell could hear the beat. To her right, the sleeping man had slumped onto her shoulder, drooling slightly on her expensive blazer. O'Connell felt a wave of nausea. This was the woman who effectively owned their fuel supply. Dr. Adewale? O'Connell asked, his voice cracking slightly. Zola turned her head slowly. She looked at the captain, then at Sherry. Her expression was unreadable. Captain, she said, her voice barely audible over the hum of the auxiliary power unit. Ma'am, I am Captain Michael O'Connell, he began, crouching down in the aisle to be at eye level with her. The floor was sticky. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Headquarters has informed me of your presence on board. I had no idea you were back here. It was not a misunderstanding, Captain, Zola said softly. It was a decision. A very specific decision made by your gate agent. He was quite clear that I did not belong in the front. He was wrong, O'Connell said quickly. He was incredibly, catastrophically wrong. Please, Dr. Adewale, come with me. We have your seat in 2A ready. We can move you right now. Zola gently lifted the sleeping man's head off her shoulder and pushed him back against his own seat. No, thank you, Captain. I have been assigned this seat. I have been told I am lucky to be on this flight at all. I would not want to be disruptive by moving while the seatbelt sign is on. The sign isn't on for you, ma'am, O'Connell pleaded. Please. The CEO, Arthur King, is trying to reach you. He's on the satellite phone in the cockpit. Tell Arthur, Zola said, that I am comfortable. I am experiencing the product his airline offers to people who look like me. It is illuminating. At that moment, there was a commotion at the front of the plane. The cockpit door had opened, and a breathless, sweating figure burst onto the jet bridge and into the cabin. It was Brandon Kiefer. He looked like a man who had just run a marathon in a suit that was too tight. His hair was disheveled, his face slick with sweat. He rushed down the aisle, pushing past Sherry, past the confused passengers. "Where is she?" Brandon gasped. He saw the captain kneeling in the aisle. He saw Zola. Brandon froze. Seeing her there, sandwiched between the drooling man and the techno kid, looking like royalty in a dungeon, hit him with the force of a physical blow. The reality of what he had done crashed down. "You," Brandon breathed. Zola looked up at him. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Kiefer, you have come to check my bag size again?" "I." "Dr. Adewale," Brandon stammered. He looked at the captain, who was glaring at him with pure murder in his eyes. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who you were." "That is exactly the problem, Mr. Kiefer," Zola said, her voice cutting through the noise of the cabin. "You didn't know who I was, but you treated me like dirt because of what you thought I was. If I were a white woman in a suit, would you have checked my ticket 3 times? Would you have mimicked my accent? Would you have thrown me in the back?" The cabin had gone silent. Passengers in the surrounding rows were pulling out their phones. The airport agent laughs video was about to be born, recorded from 12 different angles. I was just following protocol," Brandon lied, his voice weak. "Liar," a woman in row 47 hissed. "We heard you at the gate. You were making fun of her." "I saw him point and laugh," a man in row 49 added. "He called her a glitch." Brandon looked around, trapped. The passengers were turning on him. The captain was furious. And Zola just sat there, the eye of the storm. "I need you to come to the front," Brandon said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please. If you don't come to the front, I lose my job." Zola paused. She looked at her watch. "Mr. Kiefer," she said, "you lost your job 45 minutes ago. You just haven't clocked out yet." She turned to the captain. "Captain O'Connell, I will not delay your flight further, but I will not move to first class. If this airline wishes to keep my business, they must understand what it feels like to be minimized. I will fly to London in seat 48E. And for every hour I spend in this seat, the buyout price for Stratosphere's contract goes down by $10 million. The captain paled. It was a 7-hour flight. That was $70 million. "But," Zola continued, looking at Brandon, "I do have one condition for remaining on this plane." "Anything," Brandon said. "Anything. You will apologize," Zola said, "not to me, but to every single person in this economy cabin whom you have disrespected, hurried, or treated like cattle today. You will take the intercom, and you will apologize for your arrogance. And then you will leave this aircraft so we can depart." Brandon looked at the intercom handset hanging on the wall by the galley. It felt like a gallows. "Do it," Captain O'Connell growled, "or I'll throw you off the plane myself." Brandon Kiefer's walk to the galley was the longest journey of his life. His hands shook so badly, he dropped the handset twice before gripping it. He pressed the all-call button. A chime rang out through the plane. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice wavered, cracking under the strain. This is the gate agent." He looked at Zola. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking out the tiny porthole window. "I want to apologize," he choked out. I was rude today. I was unprofessional. I judged people based on appearances, and I abused my authority." Tears of humiliation stung his eyes. He was a bully who had been punched back by the universe. "I am deeply sorry," he whispered. "To everyone." He hung up. The plane was deadly silent. No one clapped. No one cheered. It was too awkward, too raw for that. It was the sound of a man's ego dying in real time. Brandon fled the plane. He didn't look back. He ran up the jet bridge, past the confused cleaning crew, and into the terminal where 2 airport security officers and the station manager were waiting for him. They stripped his badge before he even got to the break room. Back on Flight 808, the doors were closed. Captain O'Connell returned to the cockpit, defeated but determined to get the plane in the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are cleared for departure. We apologize for the delay. The flight to London was excruciating. Usually, first-class passengers are the ones who get the attention. But on Flight 808, the service centered around row 48. Sherry and the other flight attendants were in a panic. They brought Zola glasses of champagne, which she politely declined, asking for water. They brought her the first-class meal, warm nuts, filet mignon, porcelain plates balancing it awkwardly on the tiny economy tray table. Zola ate the meal with the same dignity she would have had at a state dinner. To her left, the teenager with the headphones had taken them off. "Are you famous?" the kid asked, eyeing the filet mignon. Zola smiled, slicing her steak. "No. I am just a customer who knows her rights." "Cool," the kid said. "You want some of my Pringles?" "That is very kind of you," Zola said, and she took a single chip. Throughout the 7 hours, the atmosphere in the plane shifted. Word spread. The passengers in economy realized who was sitting among them. They stopped, reclined their seats to give her space. The man who had drooled on her woke up, realized what was happening, and spent the next 6 hours apologizing profusely. But the real drama was happening on the ground. While Zola sat in the middle seat, watching movies on the tiny screen, the Sovereign Travel Group was executing her orders. By the time Flight 808 was over the Atlantic, the news had leaked. A passenger in row 49 had uploaded the video of the confrontation at the gate, filmed through the window, and the apology. The title, "Billionaire Boss Lady Humbles Racist Agent." It had 2 million views in 3 hours. Stratosphere Airlines stock began to plummet. It dropped 4% in the first hour, then 8%. Investors were spooked. If Sovereign pulled out, Stratosphere wouldn't have the fuel infrastructure to run their transatlantic routes efficiently. They would have to buy fuel on the spot market at a 30% premium. It would wipe out their annual profit. Arthur King, the CEO of Stratosphere, was in a war room in London, watching the flight tracker. "She's still in economy?" King screamed at his VP of operations. "Captain says she refused to move, sir. She said she's deducting 10 million from the deal for every hour." King did the math. $70 million. That gate agent cost us $70 million in leverage. Plus the stock drop. We've lost $250 million in market cap since lunch. "What do we do when she lands?" the VP asked. King straightened his tie. He looked pale. "We meet her. I meet her. Personally. At the gate. With a red carpet. Literally, get a red carpet." The descent into London Heathrow is usually a chaotic affair of stacking patterns and turbulent clouds. But for Flight 808, the approach felt strangely funereal. The cabin lights had been brought up for landing, cutting through the dim, sleepy atmosphere of a 7-hour transatlantic journey. In the rear of the aircraft, the mood was unrecognizable from the tension at takeoff. Row 48, usually the most despised row on a Boeing 777 due to its proximity to the lavatories and the lack of recline, had become a makeshift throne room. The flight attendants, who had spent the first hour of the flight in a state of nervous paralysis, had spent the last 6 hours trying to atone for their colleagues' sins. Sherry, the lead attendant, approached Zola one last time as the fasten seatbelt sign chimed. She held a steaming hot towel with a pair of silver tongs, an amenity strictly reserved for business and first class. "Dr. Adewale," Sherry whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "The captain asked me to inform you that we are on final approach. He wanted you to know that he has radioed ahead. Ground services have arranged for a special arrival protocol." Zola accepted the towel, wiping her hands with slow, deliberate movements. She handed it back with a nod. "Thank you, Sherry. You have been very kind under difficult circumstances." "I'm just so sorry," Sherry blurted out, tears pricking her eyes. "We all are. What Brandon did, it doesn't represent us. It represents the culture that allowed him to feel comfortable doing it." Zola corrected gently but firmly. "But I do not blame you for his actions. Please, take your seat for landing." As the landing gear deployed with a heavy mechanical thud, Zola looked out the small, scratched porthole. Below her, the gray sprawl of London rose to meet them. She checked her watch. It was 3:45 p.m. The markets were about to close. By now, the damage to Stratosphere's stock would be quantified, the losses cemented in the ledgers of the London Stock Exchange. The wheels touched down with a screech of rubber on concrete. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the massive beast of a plane. Usually, as a plane taxis to the gate, the sound of seatbelts clicking open is immediate, followed by the rush of passengers standing up to grab their bags. But today, Captain O'Connell's voice boomed over the intercom before the plane even came to a full stop. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London. Please remain seated, with your seatbelts fastened." We have a security protocol to execute before general deplaning can commence. I repeat, please remain seated. The plane didn't pull into a standard jet bridge gate at Terminal 5. Instead, it turned onto a remote hardstand, a VIP tarmac area usually reserved for heads of state or private charters. Through the windows, passengers began to murmur. "Look at that," the teenager sitting next to Zola said, pressing his face against the glass. "Are those cops?" Down on the wet tarmac, a convoy had assembled. 3 black Range Rovers with tinted windows were flanked by 2 police escort motorcycles. A group of men in dark suits stood huddled under large black umbrellas, shielding themselves from the drizzle. They looked like undertakers, waiting for a body. "They are not police," Zola said, recognizing the lead figure even from this distance. "That is, the board of directors." The plane came to a halt. The engines whined down into silence. Captain O'Connell emerged from the cockpit immediately. He didn't wait for the door to open. He walked straight down the aisle, past the bewildered first-class passengers who were already standing up despite his instructions. "Sit down, sir," O'Connell snapped at a banker in row 3. "We are not deplaning from the front today." The captain walked all the way to row 48. The entire plane craned their necks to watch. The silence was thick, heavy with curiosity and awe. The viral video had circulated via the onboard Wi-Fi. By now, nearly everyone on board knew that the woman in 48E was the reason for the black SUVs outside. "Dr. Adewale," O'Connell said, bowing his head slightly, a gesture of respect that bordered on military reverence. "Your transport is ready. We have stairs positioned at the rear door. You will be the first to leave." Zola unbuckled her seatbelt. The metallic click echoed in the quiet cabin. She stood up. She smoothed the front of her emerald suit, which, miraculously, remained unwrinkled despite the cramped quarters. She picked up her modest black carry-on. She turned to the teenager beside her. "Thank you for the Pringles," she said, "and for treating me like a person, not a ticket code." "No problem," the kid stammered, wide-eyed. Zola turned and walked. It was a reverse walk of shame. Usually, economy passengers have to trudge past the luxury of first class, eyeing the champagne and legroom with envy. Today, the dynamic was inverted. Zola walked from the back, moving forward with a regal, predatory grace. As she passed through the economy cabin, a woman in row 30 started to clap. Then a man in row 22 joined in. Within seconds, a ripple of applause followed her up the aisle. It wasn't just for her. It was a collective release of tension. A cheering for the underdog who had bitten back. She reached the galley. The rear door was open, letting in the cool, damp London air. Sherry stood by the door. "Goodbye, Dr. Adewale." Zola didn't look back. She stepped out onto the metal stairs. The wind whipped at her clothes, but she didn't flinch. She descended the stairs, her heels clicking on the metal steps. At the bottom, standing on the oil-stained concrete of the tarmac, waited Arthur King. The CEO of Stratosphere Airlines looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His tie was slightly askew. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with red. Behind him stood his VP of Operations and his General Counsel, both looking equally terrified. Arthur King stepped forward, ignoring the rain soaking his expensive Italian suit. He didn't offer a handshake. He knew he hadn't earned it. He simply gestured to the open door of the lead Range Rover. "Dr. Adewale," King said, his voice struggling to be heard over the noise of the airport. "Please, let's get you out of the rain. We have a private suite arranged at the Windsor Lounge. We can dry off, get you some food, and talk." Zola stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She didn't move toward the car. She stood firmly on the tarmac, forcing the billionaire CEO to stand in the rain with her. "I do not need a lounge, Arthur," she said, her voice cutting through the wind. "And I do not need food. I ate the lasagna in economy. It was adequate." "Zola, please," King pleaded, wiping rainwater from his forehead. "The press is at the perimeter fence. The paparazzi are using long lenses. We need to get you out of sight." "Let them take their pictures," Zola said, glancing toward the chain-link fence, where flashes were indeed popping in the distance. "They are capturing the reality of your airline, Arthur. A loyal partner, a majority stakeholder, standing in the rain because your staff decided she wasn't priority enough. We fired him," King blurted out. "Kiefer. He's gone. Terminated, effective immediately." I signed the order myself an hour ago. That is a start, Zola said coolly, but firing one man is like trimming a weed. The roots remain. She pulled her phone from her pocket. She showed him the screen. It displayed a graph, a steep, jagged red line plunging downward. That is your stock price, Arthur, she said. You have lost nearly $300 million in market capitalization since I boarded this flight. My team at Sovereign has drafted the press release announcing the total withdrawal of the Meridian contract. If I press send, that red line goes straight to zero. You will be insolvent by Friday. King looked at the phone, then at her. He was shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. Don't, he whispered. Please. We can fix this. Name your price. The termination fees, the penalties, we'll waive everything. We'll give you a discount on the logistics deal. I don't want a discount, Zola said. I want control. She took a step closer to him, invading his personal space. Here are the terms to keep Stratosphere Airlines alive, she said, ticking them off on her fingers. 1. The Meridian deal goes through, but not at $950 million. The new price is $850 million. That is a $100 million penalty for the disrespect I endured today. You will absorb that loss personally from your executive bonus pool. King winced, but nodded quickly. Done. $850 million. Done. 2. Zola continued. I want a seat on the board of directors, a voting seat. I want oversight on your hiring practices, your training protocols, and your customer service standards. I am going to turn this airline inside out, Arthur. No one will ever be treated like a second-class citizen on a Stratosphere plane again, or I will fire the entire executive suite myself. The general counsel behind King stepped forward. Dr. Adewale, a board seat requires shareholder approval. We can't just, then call an emergency meeting, Zola snapped, not looking at the lawyer. Or, watch your stock hit zero. Choose. King held up a hand to silence his lawyer. He looked at Zola. He saw the resolve in her eyes. He knew he had no leverage. He was a captain of industry who had just run his ship onto the rocks, and she was the only tugboat in the ocean. Agreed, King said heavily. We will appoint you interim director pending ratification. You have the seat. Good, Zola said. And 3. There's a third? King asked weakly. There is always a third, Zola said. She gestured back up the stairs to the plane, where the faces of the flight attendants were pressed against the glass of the door, watching. The crew on this flight, Zola said, Sherry and her team. They were terrified. They were placed in an impossible position by your gate agent. They tried their best to fix a broken situation. I want them all commended. I want a formal letter of apology placed in their files for the stress they were put under, and I want them each given a double-time bonus for this flight. King let out a breath. This was the easiest demand of all. Consider it done. They'll get the bonus in their next pay packet. Zola nodded. She looked at her phone again. She tapped the screen, not to send the press release, but to delete it. Then we have a deal, Arthur, she said. Now, you may take my bag. She held out her nondescript black carry-on. Arthur King, the CEO who controlled a fleet of 300 aircraft, hesitated for only a fraction of a second. He reached out and took the handle of her luggage. He, the billionaire, carried the bag of the woman he had wronged. This way, Dr. Adewale, he said, gesturing to the open car door. Zola stepped into the warmth of the Range Rover. The leather seat was soft, the air conditioning set to a perfect temperature. She sat back and watched as Arthur King loaded her bag into the trunk himself, closing the lid with a respectful thud. As the convoy pulled away, splashing through the puddles of the tarmac, Zola didn't smile. She simply pulled out her tablet and opened the calendar for the next board meeting. She had work to do. The walk of shame was over. The reign of Zola Adewale had just begun. The fallout wasn't immediate. It was a slow, suffocating dismantle of a life Brandon Kiefer had spent a decade building. 3 days after the incident, while Zola Adewale was in London finalizing the hostile restructuring of the Sovereign Stratosphere deal, Brandon sat in a small, windowless conference room in the bowels of JFK's Terminal 4. Across from him sat the station manager, a human resources director from headquarters named Mrs. Holloway, and a lawyer from Stratosphere's legal department. Brandon was still in denial. He had spent the last 72 hours hiding in his apartment, ignoring the thousands of notifications on his phone. He assumed this meeting was a formality, a slap on the wrist, a mandatory sensitivity training course, maybe a suspension. He was a union member. After all, he had rights. Mr. Kiefer, Mrs. Holloway began, her voice devoid of warmth. We have reviewed the security footage. We have reviewed the passenger testimonials. We have reviewed the audio logs from the gate. It was a stressful morning, Brandon interrupted, leaning back in his chair, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Look, she was baiting me. She knew what she was doing. She wanted a reaction. I'm the victim here. The lawyer slid a piece of paper across the table. It wasn't a disciplinary notice, it was a termination letter. Effective immediately, the lawyer said, your employment with Stratosphere Airlines is terminated for cause. Specifically, gross misconduct, violation of the Code of Ethics, and actions causing significant reputational and financial damage to the corporation. You can't do that, Brandon scoffed. The union will eat you alive. The union, the station manager said quietly, looking at the floor, has already reviewed the footage. They declined to send a representative today, Brandon. They aren't backing you. No one is. Brandon felt the blood drain from his face. But I have a pension. I have flight benefits. You have nothing, the lawyer corrected. Because the termination is for gross misconduct, you forfeit your severance. Furthermore, Stratosphere Airlines is reserving the right to sue you personally for damages. The stock dip attributable to your specific interaction at Gate 42B is estimated at $240 million in market cap loss. If shareholders sue us, we will join you as a third-party defendant. Sue me? Brandon's voice squeaked. I make $45,000 a year. Then I suggest you find a very good lawyer, Mrs. Holloway said, standing up. Please hand over your badge. Security will escort you to your vehicle. Do not clean out your locker. We will mail your personal effects. Brandon walked out of the airport, not as a gatekeeper, but as a ghost. But the universe wasn't done with him yet. The court of public opinion. Unemployment was the least of Brandon's problems. The video, titled The $950 Million Laugh, had crossed platform boundaries. It was on TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and even the evening news. Brandon's face was everywhere. When he tried to apply for a job at a rental car agency a week later, the manager took one look at his resume, looked at his face, and simply said, "Get out." When he went to his local bar, the bartender served him a warm beer and told him the tab was double. "Asshole tax," the bartender said. But the crushing blow came from his personal life. His girlfriend, a flight attendant for a rival airline, packed her bags 2 days after the firing. "I can't be seen with you," she told him as she loaded her car. "Do you know what they're saying in the galleys? You're a joke, Brandon. You're the guy who tanked the merger. I fly with Nigerian doctors, engineers, and royalty every day. You made us all look like trash." Alone in his apartment, watching his savings dwindle, Brandon decided to fight back. Driven by arrogance and a refusal to accept responsibility, he found a predatory lawyer willing to take his case on contingency. He sued Stratosphere Airlines and Dr. Zola Adewale for defamation and wrongful termination, claiming Zola had staged the event to manipulate the stock price. It was a fatal error, the legal massacre. 6 months later, the deposition took place. Zola didn't send a representative. She came herself. She sat across the table from Brandon and his sleazy lawyer, accompanied by Benedict Sterling, the Sovereign Group's chief legal officer, a man known in legal circles as the Butcher. Brandon's lawyer started aggressively. "Dr. Adewale, isn't it true that you purposely dressed in a way to obscure your wealth? That you used a glitch to provoke my client?" Zola adjusted her glasses. She looked at Brandon with that same pitiable expression she had worn at the gate. "I dressed in a suit," Zola said calmly. "I spoke English. I presented a valid ticket. If my skin color and my accent were enough to provoke your client into denying me service, that is not a trap I set. That is a trap he built for himself." Then, Benedict Sterling took over. He didn't just defend Zola. He went on the offensive. He pulled up Brandon's entire work history. He played recordings of 5 other incidents where Brandon had been rude to passengers with accents, Hispanic families, Asian tourists, elderly Caribbean women. "Mr. Kiefer," Benedict said, his voice smooth and cold, "we have established a pattern. You are not a victim of a bad day. You are a predator who finally tried to eat something that could bite back. The countersuit was brutal. Benedict filed a motion for legal fees and damages for harassment. The judge, disgusted by Brandon's lack of remorse and the overwhelming evidence of bias, not only threw out Brandon's lawsuit but ordered him to pay Zola's legal costs. The bill was $145,000. Brandon declared bankruptcy. His car was repossessed. He was evicted from his apartment. He moved back in with his parents in New Jersey at the age of 35, a man broken by his own ego. The boardroom ascension. While Brandon's life was collapsing, Zola's influence was soaring. The renegotiated deal with Stratosphere Airlines had fundamentally changed the company. As a new board member, Zola didn't just sit in meetings. She cleaned house. She spearheaded the Meridian Initiative, a mandatory overhaul of the airline's customer service protocols. It wasn't just fluffy training videos. It was a rigorous system where gate agents were evaluated not just on speed, but on equity. In her first board meeting, the old guard stuffy men in gray suits, who had run the airline for decades, tried to sideline her. "Zola," one director said, "we appreciate your input, but operations are complex. We can't fire everyone who has a bad day." Zola stood up. She projected the slide of the stock price drop from that Tuesday. "Gentlemen," she said, "racism is not a bad day. It is a fiduciary risk. It is a liability. You lost nearly $1 billion in value because one man thought he was superior to a customer. If we do not root this out, we are not just failing morally, we are failing financially. I am not here to be your diversity token. I am here to protect my investment." The room went silent. They realized then that Zola wasn't just a passenger they had wronged. She was the smartest person in the room. Within a year, Stratosphere Airlines had the highest customer satisfaction rating in the industry. They won awards for inclusivity. Their stock price doubled, making the Sovereign Group and Zola even wealthier. The final twist, 1 year later. It was the night of the Global Aviation Awards in New York City. The event was a black-tie gala held at a luxury hotel, attended by the titans of the travel industry. Zola Adewale was the guest of honor. She was receiving the Visionary of the Year award. She wore a gold gown that shimmered under the lights, her hair braided in an intricate crown. She looked every inch the queen she was. She arrived in a limousine. The red carpet was swarming with photographers. As the car pulled up to the valet stand, the door was opened by a man in a red vest. He kept his head down, focused on the pavement, avoiding eye contact with the dazzling guests. It was a defense mechanism. He had learned that if he didn't look people in the eye, they wouldn't recognize him. "Good evening, ma'am," the valet mumbled, extending a hand to help her out. Zola stepped out. She paused. She knew that voice. She looked down. The valet was thinner than she remembered. His hair was graying prematurely. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, weary, hunched posture. "Hello, Brandon," Zola said. Brandon Kiefer froze. He looked up, terror flooding his eyes. He saw the woman in gold. The woman he had sent to row 48. Dr. Adewale," he whispered. His hands shook. The cameras were flashing nearby, but they were focused on Zola, not him. To the rest of the world, he was invisible, just a servant. I didn't know you'd be here," Brandon stammered. "I'm just working. Please, I really need this job." Zola looked at him. She could have made a scene. She could have called the manager. She could have had him fired again. It would have been easy. But Zola understood something Brandon never did. True power isn't about crushing people who are already beneath you. She reached into her purse. She pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "Keep the car close, Brandon," she said softly. "I won't be staying late." She pressed the bill into his hand. "And Brandon?" she added. "Yes, ma'am?" He choked out, tears welling in his eyes. "Zone 1, she said. "Remember that everyone you meet is in Zone 1. Treat them that way, and perhaps you will eventually find your way back to a seat at the table." She walked away, heading up the red carpet to accept her award. Brandon stood there, clutching the money, watching her ascend. He realized then that she hadn't given him the money as a tip. She had given it to him as a lesson. She had shown him grace, the very thing he had refused to show her. He wiped his eyes, straightened his red vest, and opened the door for the next car. It was an economy sedan, driven by a nervous-looking family. "Welcome," Brandon said, and for the first time in his life, he meant it. "Let me help you with your bags." That Tuesday at JFK, Brandon Kiefer thought he was just doing his job, filtering out the people he thought didn't matter. He didn't realize that in the modern world, power doesn't always wear a suit and tie, and it certainly doesn't always sound like him. He judged a book by its cover, and that book turned out to be the ledger that held his entire company's future. Dr. Zola Adewale didn't just fix an airline, she proved a universal law. Arrogance is expensive, but dignity is priceless. When you look down on people, you lose the ability to see who they really are, and sometimes, you miss the fact that they are the ones holding the keys to your fate. If you enjoyed this story of justice, karma, and high-stakes business drama, please make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that respect costs nothing, but disrespect can cost you everything. Thanks for watching.